Hello, Miss Barbara. My name is Caroline Baerg. And who are you?
I'm Barb Maher.
Okay.
But I was Barb Vaca at the time that we collected, and I collected any of these things.
Okay. So, Barbara, you heard that I was in Mankato, and I'm from Nigeria. Then
25 years ago.
And, well, no, I came 1995. So that will be 28 years ago.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So you got so excited that you wanted to meet this woman from Nigeria. So you came, you found me, and then we developed a relationship. And you told me that you were in Nigeria. What took you to Nigeria?
Well, first of all, you came as we started as you are my doctor.
Correct. Yes.
And you had spent all of your life in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Gone through all of your training,
yes.
And then met your American husband and came to Mankato.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Good.
So you told me you went to Nigeria. What took you to Nigeria and when?
Well, I graduated from university in 1963, and right after that, I had signed up with Peace Corps because all through my 4 years in university, I had been hearing about the fact that they were going to pass some legislation in the Senate that they would set up this new Peace Corps that would help America to share in some of the wealth that we had in some of the countries that did not have as much wealth.
So
as
you
we
were
had.
a pioneer then when it comes to Peace Corps. You were the first set of Peace Corps.
No, not first part. I was a second. And they started it in 1961. They sent the first group over. I was the second set that they sent in 1963.
Okay.
But by then, the first group was just returning.
Okay.
So, as I said, we actually had some training from people who had been to the different countries, but they didn't necessarily come from Nigeria. Mm-hmm. They could have been someplace in Asia, or they could have been in Northern Europe, or someplace like that. And
so what made you choose Nigeria?
I didn't choose it.
They just sent you?
I just said, I'm willing to go to Peace Corps, and I got something in the mail that said Nigeria, and I got out a map to look up where it was. And I really was delighted to hear that it was in Nigeria, because I thought that will be a really interesting place, because 1963 was when all the civil rights were, things were going on in the government and in, meetings and things like that. And I thought that is where many of our Americans came from 200 years ago and 100 years ago. So I thought it would be interesting to go there.
I would be really excited to know about your experience in Nigeria, what you learned, what you gained, and what excited you, and why you kept all of these things with you.
Well, I went there knowing, I read as much as I could before I left. And then I had good training. We had trained for a whole month to be able to know what we were going to do, and almost all of us were teachers. And that's what I had been trained to do, was be a teacher. So I was assigned, and I was very interested to find out that I got an assignment in Abanama, eastern Nigeria, which was in the Niger Delta. And at first I would be flying to Nigeria and go to the main capital, and then I would go overland, and then I would have to get on a boat, which was a dugout canoe, and take a 2-hour trip to go to Abanama, which was where I would be teaching in a boys' school. And I was the only woman there.
A boys' Anglican school.
And they really would have preferred a man, but because I had the science background and they needed a science teacher, they took me, and they were all very nice and very supportive of me. But it was very interesting, because all through my high school and my college, I'd gone to an all-girls school. So it was really an experience, not only counterculturally, but actually to be working with all these men, which was delightful.
Well, let's get to business now and show people the things that you brought with you. Would you?
Okay. Well, I never had a home of my own, because I had lived at home, because my university was in the same town that I went to the university for. So I got to decorate my own home for the first time. I was given an apartment that was over an abandoned bank building that had because at one time Abanama had been a major port. But when there were really good roads developed within Nigeria, they had changed the port. Instead, they had it at Port Harcourt. So, as I said, I had very nice housing. And so I started going to some of the local markets, going to travel through the country, and I picked up all kinds of arts and crafts things because I'd always enjoyed the things that people did with their own imagination using the inexpensive materials that they had at hand. So we're going to go through some of these, and I know that you are going to talk a lot about what people wore, because the first thing we have is a whole group of hand-woven fabrics. And the first thing that I noticed was that almost most of the women at this time still did not wear pants. I never wore a pair of pants or a pair of shorts when I was in Nigeria.
No.
Women wore dresses
Back then.
or skirts, and all of the younger women wore, regular, typical, nice cotton dresses usually. But all of the other women dressed more like I'm dressed. So what did we have? I end up with, I have and this was given to me as a gift when I was leaving. And
this is 100% cotton. And in the south or southeast, they will call this Ankara, but in the north, we'll call it Atampa. So they'll take this piece of cloth and they'll design their tops and their skirts and their wrapper. And so this was given to her as a young unmarried lady. They gave her this to wear. And because at the time you're not married yet and you don't have children, so you dress a little bit different.
And then I have this, and this was what we called a wrapper. I just thought it was so interesting because I would be, sometimes in the morning when I was getting off to school, I would see the local women in the town because I lived in the town and the school was about a mile away, and I would bike up to school and I would see the women and they have their wrapper, and all they would do was they would come out of their home and they had just been sleeping and they just took their wrapper and tucked it in this way, and that was their gown to go out and do some early chores with. They didn't have to have any other fancy clothing. And so I was always, and then I had seen them, they often had another one of these 2-yard pieces of fabric, and they would often have it, and they would use it to carry their baby.
Yeah, we'll show them eventually.
Okay.
So let's talk about
Okay, well, these are a kwete cloth, and one of the things that in the eastern Nigeria, this is all hand-woven cloth, and there are different qualities of it, and this is one of the very high-quality ones, and you can pull it off, that I was given as a going-away present.
So
I purchased...
This is very common in the southwestern part of the country. No, southeast.
Yeah, southeast.
Yes. And this is
central.
hand-woven completely, and very expensive then. You hardly find this anymore. During our time, this is going out of, people have lost the art in some way. So this is very prized item if you should take it out to Nigeria.
I did look it up online, and this is still sold online, but rather it's, when I was there, we always sold it in 2-yard pieces because 2-yard pieces made up your skirt and made up your strapless dress if you wanted it. Now they're just selling it as small pieces because I suppose it's so expensive to buy a whole 2 yards.
And there are different kinds. These are probably the more ordinary ones here. But generally, these are all, again, like she said, hand-woven.
These are the ones I could afford. This is the fancy one they gave me when I left. Okay. And then they had some, again, a fancy top, the dress, the top that they had.
So you wear this top, and then you take this wrapper here to go with it. Yep.
And that I was given it with both that. And then here was another one, too, that I think I picked this one up myself.
Because the women there, they sew. Most women in the country back then, they go to tailoring school, they know how to sew, to make their tops themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so as I said, I picked up all those things, and then I would also often go to the local market.
By the way.
Oh, that's the
yes.
Okay.
So this is a picture of her dressed in the fancy outfit they gave her. She's in the middle here. Some friends gave that to her.
So that's almost 60 years ago.
Neat.
With a really good friend and her mother. And then whenever I had time off, even sometimes on a weekend or so, I would take that 2-hour ride into Port Harcourt where they had a big market, and I would pick up things. And then the other thing was that every once in a while in our more remote place, we would have something that I called the Hausa man, but it's actually a peddler. And that man would travel all through the country because we had no stores that sold, the arts and crafts that you could get a whole mix of them. You had to go to the city that had the arts and craft. So they had each name, just like this is a quete cloth because it comes from a quete. But these things were things that the Hausa man would sometimes bring in a big pack and knock on my door and said, would you like to see some of these things? So I was anxious to get things that I would have as decorating my house, and they came from many different places. I would also stop at the local markets, and I was always intrigued by all the different kinds of things you could have to take care of your home,
Yep.
but it didn't help me very much.
Yeah, these are actually combs that are made locally, and you would probably find some of this now, but this is real solid out of wood. They make combs.
Yeah, they had many, many varieties.
Still works. Yep. Yeah.
And
Musical instrument.
yes, musical instruments. And I thought this was very intriguing because these are hear no evil, see no evil,
speak no evil.
and they're made out of a very heavy
Yeah.
wood, ebony.
This
I'm
looks
sure
like
this
ebony.
is ebony,
Yeah, this is ebony wood, yeah.
which is very hard to carve.
But it's quite common where we are from Nigeria. And then masks are not unusual to find, this kind of artwork.
And this one,
And these are usually more from the southern part. Depending on the art, you know where it's coming from. So this is more
the
southern.
type of face they have on it.
Yeah, face mask, yeah. And this actually is a purse, it's a wallet.
And in what, I don't know what kind of it.
This is real leather, it's
It
cow
looks like
skin.
it's some kind of snake.
Oh yeah, it is a snake skin here, snake skin. And it's typically made in the north, very typical of northern Nigeria,
And this also was from the north.
from the north. This is from a horn of a cow or something. Okay.
And in the area, in the town that I lived in, they would have somebody who would go from the area that did not have tsetse fly. My area had tsetse fly, and that meant that you would be worried about having, it would kill the cattle because they couldn't be protected from it. So they would start in the north with one of the cows from up there, and they would walk it all the way down to my town, which was in the Niger Delta, was the last place that this cow went to, and it got slaughtered. So they didn't, most of the horns came from someplace elsewhere where they had more cattle. But one of the trips that I took when I was there was to go to Ecotapeni. I had heard about the wonderful area that they had in Ecotapeni, where they had a great big marketplace with all kinds of things. And I had seen parades in my community of the Ekpo Society. And it was a man's society, and they wore special costumes. They had, certain chants that they had. And I remember one of my friends saying, "Oh, you have to come and see this parade." But she said, "Stay in the back and be very quiet." Because women were not supposed to have anything to do with this. This was a men's only society that was celebrating something. So I went there to see what they had, and I managed to get everything that they had. So we had, there's the, oops, I have something holding it up.
That's a head.
Yeah, there's your head cover. And here's your grass skirt.
So this goes on the head.
Right.
And then it covers the face.
And you can hardly breathe. I don't know. I don't think it's very comfortable to have.
Well, but it's supposed to be a men's secret society thing.
And then
This is at the ankle, right?
right, that's an ankle bracelet. So when you marched along, they would be doing a dance. It would rattle. And they also had other rattles.
And then these are on the hand, on the wrist or so.
Yeah. And this went around the waist.
Around the waist, yep. They're supposed to scare the
Well, I don't know.
they're supposed to scare the people so you fear them.
Yeah, or scare the bad,
Or yeah.
the bad gods
Yeah.
that might cause some
Might cause
problems.
some problems, yeah.
And then this was one of the carvings that I got when I was there. This also came from this part in the south where they use a softwood of some sort, and this was supposed to be a flutist. and they said it was somebody that was a well-known god, I think, or somebody that they thought of as an ancestor or something, and that was that representation of that. And I often thought when I saw this that I think a Cottapenny should come and start making Halloween costumes, because that's certainly a popular thing to buy here. And then, besides this one, I also had gotten this was my splurge, because this was much more expensive. And this was an expensive carving. And I thought it was very interesting that the cheeks have something carved into them, because I was in an Igbo area, but the Yoruba area often had things carved in they had markings and things on their speech.
Marks, yeah.
So I don't know if that had something to do with the tribe that they belong to. And here are more things that are, again, made from the dry grasses there. And when I looked them up online just recently, they said that this is now the center in the whole country of the places where they grow grasses. So that they're still using them and probably still making things out of the grasses and the fibers. So they have, little purses that they made. This is one you could go to the market with that.
Oh yeah, it's a purse. You can go to the market with this. Nice. And this was all in the 60s.
This was all these things were purchased before 1965 when I left. And here's just another one of those. And of course, being a girl at that time, I also looked at all the things that they had as far as jewelry. So the one that intrigued me the most were these. And when I went to the markets, almost every market seemed to have some of these, and they called them Beada beads. And I tried to look that up, and Beada is still famous for its beads, but the beads that they have now are much more elaborate.
Actually, there is a region in Nigeria, the Beada. Yeah, Beada. They have a well-known glass factory in which they make, so in fact, I have one at home that is really big. They're still making them.
Oh, really?
And they make them really nice and very fancy. Yeah, so this is from Beada.
Well, and this was
Niger State, it's in the Niger State of Nigeria. They're still very famous for making glass beads.
All right, but I was told that what these were handmade in the sand from pop bottles. This was a pop bottle that would be 7-Up or something like that.
Yep.
And these were the ones that came from the beer bottles.
Yep.
And so,
like Guinness.
Right.
Guinness bottle, yep.
And when you went to the market, these two were both inexpensive. I never bought the cobalt blue ones, because the cobalt blue ones came from Pepto-Bismol bottles. And Pepto-Bismol bottles were very rare. So they didn't have any of those to melt to make the beads. So then they were very expensive.
And this is from a stone, actually.
Yes, both of these I think are all of these are kind of semi-precious. These I've been able to find that are called moonstones. I'm not sure about the other two. So again, the people were using whatever was handy for them at the time that they were in the place that they were living usually. And
woodwork is very common back then.
Right. And these all came from, I was traveling through the country, and I stopped at in the community that was known for Auca carvings in the little town of Auca. And all of the things that they had there, there's one more thing we can find too in there. All of the things there were made out of wood, and they're still known for carving because of the carvings that they have. And even though these look kind of similar, each one has a different set of markings on it. And they also made some beautiful doorways for I saw one in a chapel, and they had them carve everything for the door of the chapel. So, and all of these were sold from the doorway, right in front of the door of the house of the man who did the carving. So as I said, it was really a very interesting
So,
trip.
Barbara, I really appreciate your love for what you do and did, and the fact that you preserved these things and kept them, and your willingness to share your experience and show the things that you brought with you. Because even though I'm a Nigerian, I grew up in Nigeria, you've shown me things that my generation, we just kind of like brush over these things. So when she invited me to her house to see this, I was like, wow, this is great. I know my parents would have really appreciated this.
Well,
so thank you for preserving this.
But you know how
Yeah.
this came about, because she brought her sister-in-law over to visit me,
Yeah.
and the sister-in-law is teaching up in northern Nigeria in a K through 12 school that her husband is the principal of, isn't he?
She's the principal.
Oh, she is the principal.
Mm-hmm.
She is the principal. And I said, I wish I could just send these all back,
Mm-hmm.
because things that were made 60 years ago, some of the all of the craftsmen are probably dead now.
Oh, yeah.
And so then the art of doing the things, the reason to take the time and have a home industry rather than going out and being paid for something else where somebody hires you, has meant that many of these people have stopped doing the things that they do, and I want the young people to appreciate them. And so I said, we could pack them all up and we could send them back to Nigeria, but then we looked at the price of it and the awkwardness, and then the people, and she said, but then after we showed it to everybody, we would have to store it. And I have it in 2 to 3 trunks. And so we decided that it wasn't practical to send it back to Nigeria.
Right now.
So instead, you are going to help me to give the program, and we are going to put it on KTV for everybody in Mankato to watch, because the 2 of us are long-term Mankatoans. I've lived here for 53
Even
years.
though you're Canadian.
No, I'm
No,
not.
no, your husband.
My husband
Yeah,
was
yeah,
Canadian.
yeah.
So we both married husbands from different countries.
Yes.
I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so then, as I said, we're going to make it available on KTV for local people to see it. But at the same time, we're also going to put it on the World Wide Web. And actually, programs from Mankato, Minnesota can be seen at their school on the World Wide Web.
And by the way, lest I forget, she's wearing this necklace that is made out of wood.
Yeah.
You know, the bead, those little things.
Because
Because people back then, they used things to whatever is available for them.
Right, sandalwood. And when I bought them, they smelled like sandalwood for so long. But now after all this years, after 6 years, they've dried up, but they still look nice.
Well, so we'll move on to northern Nigeria.
Okay, well, we are going to do a second program, and we'll be talking about another trunk load of things from northern Nigeria. So thank you for watching us, and I hope that you've enjoyed seeing some of these things.